I can't force it.
Hi, welcome to Game and Read, where we pair a book with a video game around a central theme and discuss.
Yes, this week our theme is time travel, and we picked Braid, the 2008 indie game, and for the book to go with it, we picked our first graphic novel, Seconds by Bryan Lee O'Malley.
So I played Braid, and the general premise of Braid is that you are this guy, Tim, and you are on a quest. You think in the beginning to find this girl. Maybe you were in a relationship with her before and you lost her. Maybe she's your soulmate she's an ambiguous she. You don't really know. You're on a quest for a lady, and you're going through all these levels trying to collect puzzle pieces. But the trick is that you have to manipulate time in order to get all the puzzle pieces, complete all the levels, and reach the princess. So I played this game on our Mac. We have a Mac desktop. On Steam. I thought it was a really, really fun game. I loved the art style. It's illustration. There are some parts that are creepy, goofy. Like these enemies that you have are little brown porcupines. They sort of look like Goombas.
I always thought they had like curly hair. They're really
I
weird.
thought they were spiky. They kind of look like spiky, round Goombas, sort of. Anyway, they're goofy and cute and a little creepy, and I really liked the art style of Braid. I thought it was really cool. I also really liked the way that you manipulate time in different ways throughout the game. So the first levels, the first world, it's just rewinding time. You know, you fall in the pit, you don't die, you rewind time until you're not in the pit anymore, and then you go on with your level life. And then later on, you freeze time, you slow time in a little dimension area with this ring that you can drop. You have one world in which you have to rewind, and then your shadow does whatever you just did, and you as your little player have to go, meet your shadow somewhere to pick up the key or whatever it is. So it's a really creative game in the different ways you have to manipulate time, and you have to use the power of that world at every single level if you're going to get all the puzzle pieces. And you have to get all the puzzle pieces to move on to the final stage, which is really difficult. I had a really hard time getting all the puzzle pieces on the levels. There are 5 worlds, and within each world is anywhere from 3 to 6 levels, and there are puzzle pieces in every level. And I had to look up a walkthrough many, many, many times as I was trying to complete this game. It was hard. There were some times when what they told me to do were something I would have never, ever, ever thought of on my own. So that was a little frustrating, but it was still a really fun game, and I didn't ever get angry, yell at the computer, which is good, because a lot of times when I play video games, I yell at whatever I'm playing at. I didn't this time. So I give Braid 4.5 out of 5 stars. Because it was really hard at some points, almost like genius brain bending hard. But really fun game, really cool story. I won't spoil the end, but it's definitely worth the challenging levels to see the story to completion.
Definitely. So, I read Seconds by Bryan Lee O'Malley. This is his first book since the Scott Pilgrim series, which completed sometime in 2010-ish,
Like that.
around when the movie came out with Michael Cera. Seconds came out last year, 2014, and this is the book I actually read before Erin did. She read it recently for the readathon, and she recommended it to me, and it paired really well with Braid, so we decided to do it, even though it wasn't a new read for me. I'd read it over a year ago.
But it was so fantastic when I read it, I was like, Peter, we have to talk about it on Game and Read because it is so good.
Yes,
so we are.
I definitely give it a 5 out of 5 stars. It's a really enjoyable story. It's about this chef, Katie, and her restaurant is called Seconds, and she's working on kind of getting her life together in different ways. She's been a successful chef for a long time, but she's in kind of this transition time within her own personal relationships, as well as trying to open her own restaurant that she would actually own, rather than work at one that she helped start but does not have real ownership of, as well as all the people she interacts with at that restaurant, and some very interesting house spirits. The way time travel comes into this book is that Katie discovers that Seconds, the building she also lives in, she lives above the restaurant, has a house spirit named Liz, L-I-S, who has these magical mushrooms, these little red, they look like the classic German Pilze good luck mushrooms, that if you eat one after writing down a mistake that you made in a little book, effectively time will go back and that mistake won't happen. So, you know,
So
if
it
I
changes
spilled
time.
something, I didn't spill that, it goes back and everything's different.
But you know that you...
Yes,
You are
the
aware that
person
you-
are
both
aware that you
things
changed
happened.
it. You're kind of Doctor Who-y where you're
Yeah.
out of the time sink. And what happens is Katie ends up abusing this and things get way out of control. Crazy stuff happens with her and her friends at the restaurant, her relationships, reality itself. Stuff happens when you mess with time travel and you don't know what you're doing. And I really like the story overall. I think it really points to she's a good character who's funny, interesting, has faults, but is still likable, which is a great thing with Bryan Lee O'Malley. Like, Scott Pilgrim is a total dick, but I love him. And the side characters in the story are also very well developed. It's a common thread with his works where you actually know stuff about these other people, even though they're not in remotely every scene at all. And I think his cast of characters, Lee O'Malley's cast of characters are always really good. And in particular with illustration in this book, the lighting and shadows I found to be really something that drove home feeling at different times. I don't know if I noticed it as much during Scott Pilgrim. I'm sure there was stuff there that I didn't pay attention to as much. But in this book, it really stood out when the lighting was a little bit different. There was a different tint to characters, or when there were certain shadows being thrown. Fire is a central element at times, and the way that interacts with the images makes it really interesting. So yeah, I'd give it 5 out of 5 stars. And yeah, that's my review of Seconds.
When we thought about how did these pair, we thought really, really well for a number
Nailed
of
it.
reasons. We did. This is like a duh one.
It's a pretty good one.
It's a good one. Some of the comparisons that make it go together so well. The first is obviously time travel is a really important element in both Seconds and
Low-key time
Braid.
travel. Nobody's going to a
Yeah.
different period. It's all like
Personal
very
lifetime
recent.
travel.
Yeah.
Personal lifetime travel, and they both deal with relationships.
Yes.
And using time travel as a solution to whatever has gone wrong in these relationships. In Braid, it's Tim and this girl. In Seconds, it's Katie and
her ex-boyfriend,
Max, but
other people she
also
works with,
her coworkers,
all kinds of folks.
the people she works with for the other restaurant. I mean, it's these relationships
Yeah.
that is kind of the impetus to changing time
Yes.
and changing the timeline.
It also comes down to like a single individual being responsible for that. You know, that's something you'd expect from a game about time travel because of how you interact with games. And it really kind of stands out. Katie is the effective narrator. Whenever there's narration going on, she's actively chiming in with it as the character herself in the box. And it really stands out as like she is kind of controlling this force that she has no idea what she's dealing with, whereas Tim is also in a similar vein.
Yeah.
You as the player don't know what you're dealing with
Yep.
until you kind of get to the end.
Yeah. The other thing that we thought works really well with these two mediums is the art style.
Definitely.
They are done by two different people,
Oh yes.
but the art style is very similar in this kind of illustration, graphic novel
Well,
not
Seconds is a
cartoony.
graphic novel, so it'd be what you'd expect.
Right.
But then,
with Braid, it still is this illustration. It almost looks like it could have come out of a graphic novel like Seconds.
yes, the animations of the characters themselves are fairly low key for a game that came out in the past 10 years. However, the illustration, like the static image at any one time that you're moving, is a gorgeous image of Tim or the weird little monsters, or just these background vistas.
And the
very lovely.
the use of color in both Seconds and in Braid is really fantastic. Just the way that the illustrators played with the shading and with the color choices. Those went really well together.
Yeah, Braid definitely pairs well with a graphic novel, especially one about time travel. Additionally, one thing that we thought was interesting about this was the fact that both creators were fairly in control of what they were doing. Bryan Lee O'Malley is the illustrator and the writer. He did have an assistant for some of the book, I know. However, it is his creation overall. It wasn't a teamwork thing like a lot of comic books are with a writer and an illustrator. Whereas Braid was one of the early on indie games that we're all so familiar with now, and definitely helped popularize that concept of one or two or a few people, very small team, making this really interesting, albeit low graphic, not a AAA game, but something that's really interesting and you can get for under $20 and really enjoy.
One thing that kind of sets these two apart from each other in a really distinct way is that Braid starts really ambiguously. You have no idea really what is going on. You learn from each world. You have these storybooks that you can read that gives you a little bit more, but you don't even really know what's going on until the very end. I mean, like,
and even then it's fairly ambiguous. The very end, you can go online and see some interesting thoughts on it.
The theories are out there. Whereas Seconds starts very specifically and particularly, and you have this clear idea of what is going on with
reality
Katie.
Is normal at the time.
Reality is totally normal, and it gets progressively more ambiguous as the book goes on. By the end, things have come back together, and yet there's still all these questions, and there's still some of that ambiguity surrounding the end result. But their trajectories are kind of opposite, in that Braid starts ambiguously and gets more
slightly less confusing.
Whereas Seconds starts from this really grounded place and then moves towards a more open, ambiguous,
paranormal at times,
paranormally kind of story. Which I think also makes them really great pairings, because they do have these different trajectories, and yet they still work so well together as stories and as mediums. Yeah,
I think the last little thing we wanted to add as far as comparisons is that we did really like that in Braid you are a male protagonist, whereas in Seconds you're it's a female protagonist, Katie, and how they kind of deal with very similar concepts of regret and trying to fix it through these supernatural means, but it doesn't really change too much based on their gender, sex, identity. So we thought that was an interesting, they just happen to be, of separate, different sexes, but very similar experiences.
Yeah, everyone has regrets. Doesn't matter who you are. Yeah, it was really well done.
And you can fix it through time travel. Not really.
You can figure time travel out. So, well, that's all for us for this episode of Game and Read. Look for our afterwards to this episode on Friday. We will talk about anything else we wanted to add and offer some more recommendations on the theme of time travel.
Or just things that pair well with these in general.
So come back and watch that video. It'll be up on Friday.
Yes. And you can see all of our posts and videos at gameandread.com. And you can find me online on Twitter and Instagram at nerdintheworld. Twitter, no spaces. Instagram, it's an underscore in between each word.
And you can find me on Twitter at emurch, EMURCH.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.